All right, well, I want to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to do today. Really glad to have you joining us for this messy conversation on mutual aid networks, um, which we'll learn a lot about, a practice rooted in indigenous traditions and practices. And at Messy Conversations, we focused on a couple of examples of this over the years, the Black Panthers breakfast program, the work of the Zapatistas and Chiapas, and other things. But we're going to have a rich and full conversation this afternoon, moderated by our own Sien. So we're excited about that. Also, a quick reminder that next time we meet, we will be in Black History Month, and Clarence has put together a really terrific um, messy conversation to get us started for Black History Month. I don't have the exact date, but it's next Monday, where we'll be looking at and talking about and listening to Black music as activism. So that should be a terrific, messy conversation. As always, we ask that you keep yourself on mute until you're asked to join the conversation, but we want you to join the conversation. And one way to do that is to put comments, questions, complaints, whatever you got in the chat. And in the second half of our time together, we will call on you and bring you into the conversation more fully. So with that, let me get out of the way, hand things off to CN, and thank you.
Thank you, David. And we can also spotlight, hopefully, our other panelists as well. I'm going to use my tech skills to do that right now. Awesome. Great. So I am joined by three lovely mutual aid participants here. Also, wait, before I say that, I wanted to mention we also have a new feedback form thing. If you do have any comments about today's conversation or any other messy conversations that you would like to share with us, feedback, suggestions, anything like that, I've just put the link for that in the chat as well. And San Francisco, oh, hello, Sarah, wonderful to have you here as well. San Francisco Bay Area Mutual Aid is also here. Great. So, yes, I'm joined by all these lovely people here who are all going to introduce themselves in just a moment, so that we can all have this conversation around mutual aid and what mutual aid is and how it differs from some of the other forms of help that you might be aware of. So yeah, if y'all just want to all go around and briefly introduce yourself and you can share what organizations you volunteer with.
Hi, I'm Ana Maria Caboy. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I volunteer with WashMasks Mutual Aid, which focuses on farm worker justice in Washington State.
I can go ahead and go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela. I use she, her pronouns. I am an organizer and co-founder of Feed the Block IE, which is a grassroots autonomous Black, Brown-led, femme-led mutual aid organization in the Inland Empire, which is in Southern California. Happy to be here. Thank you.
I can go next. My name's Ayani Hayashi. I use he, him pronouns. I organize with Common Humanity Collective in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a autonomous mutual aid group focused around distributing PPE and building and distributing DIY air purifiers. Yeah, very happy to be here. Kind of jumping in at the last minute, but hopefully I can be helpful as part of this conversation.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Sarah. I use she, they pronouns. I'm here representing SF Bay Area Mutual Aid, which is a mutual aid group that works across the Bay Area, which is a really loosely defined geographic region. Yeah, so happy to be here.
Thank you all. So happy to have all of you. So I just want to kick us off with the most obvious question. Who wants to tell us what mutual aid is?
Nobody wants to go. I mean, so I can say like how our group defines it. Um, uh, so our foundational belief is that everyone at some point in their lives, maybe the entire point, will need support of some kind from their community, but also everyone has something to offer. So the idea behind mutual aid for us is that that there's a reciprocal relationship happening between folks, that people are able to practice their skills and offer their resources in exchange for at some point receiving resources or skill share from others.
Beautiful definition. Yeah. I'm also going to be adding to our conversation Dom, who just got here. Dom, don't be alarmed. I'm about to add you to our spotlight. I hope this is okay. You can tell me if it's not, but here you go.
I was born for the spotlight. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes, we would just yeah, I would love to hear from others as well how you and your organization has defined mutual aid.
Well, one of the ways we've defined it, like the differentiation of like when we talk about solidarity, not charity, is the idea of like uplifting and supporting other communities across or our connected communities across times of needs is also because it supports us. Like WashMasks Mutual Aid is founded and organized by Seattle artists in support of solidarity with Washington farm workers. We have a lot of things in common that a lot of people don't think about. One is that we often have to travel for work. We often have to argue for the fact that we deserve to be better paid. And people tend to enjoy our product and understand that 10,000 hours of and 10,000 hours of like skill and mastery that goes into that, and understanding that there is no such thing as skilled or unskilled labor. And so we're centering those conversations between artists and artisans and crafters and connecting it with farm work as well. And especially like, what are the things we need in this world? We need to eat. And we also have a deep desire as humans to create and connect with each other across creations and creativity and spirit. So that is also a big reason why we also center creative joy as a part of our work. We talk about often how farm workers deserve safety, equity, and dignity, and creative joy and community goes under that.
And thank you, Anna Maria, for bringing in solidarity, not charity, kind of a phrase that unites a lot of mutual aid efforts. And I think if that's not something that you've ever heard before, ever thought about before, it can be kind of confusing because we hear charity a lot of times as being a thing that is very good, right? And like helps the people that have less than us and might be able to help us all find equity together. But can somebody unpack a little bit about why we say solidarity, not charity, and kind of what the differences are here between mutual aid efforts and the more traditional charity model?
I can go ahead and share a little bit about our org's understanding of that. So for us, mutual aid, and also our understanding of mutual aid, and so we're really based and follow the Black Panthers and Black and Indigenous and Third World liberation theories. So for us, it is not only a survival program, but it's also a form of power building. And so for us, mutual aid and that work is different than charity because we are really concerned of building dual power, building a system of dual power with the people that we serve. It's also reciprocal in nature, right? And where it's a form of community care that is really attacks and creates a different way of life that is against the state, right? Against forms of harm of that capitalism produces. So for us, this idea of solidarity, right, that marginalized peoples are facing a lot of the same struggles under this capitalist society, and how that unites us, and the desire and the need to have our basic needs met really unites us in this form, and we're able to create power in that. Whereas charity really is centered in kind of like a hierarchical kind of way down, where the rich class, wants people to feel like they are not the enemy by giving little crumbs to people. We always say in Feed the Block, or at least in our circles, that the nonprofit industrial complex is like a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that we actually have the resources to end homelessness and to end different forms of marginalization, but that's not its purpose. Its purpose is to continue to give little crumbs out so that people are still needing to have these nonprofits serve them so that they're able to receive more funds, so that they're able to receive more grants and keep going. So they operate like a business and not like a system, and not looking to create a system that can really challenge the state, but really just to keep the state going and people, happy with the crumb. So yeah.
Absolutely. And feel free to respond, all of you.
If I could also just piggyback a little bit off of that, especially in regards of how mutual aid differs from charity. A big thing I feel with charities often is that the people who have the resources essentially get to decide who is eligible or deserving of these kinds of aids and thing, and often especially because they don't want to actually spend that much of their resources doing anything about it, will choose to either inadequately or intentionally sort of limit the amount of resources and create an artificial scarcity around what they're actually able and willing to do to quote unquote help people. And one of the things we've definitely taken in our model of organizing is to really meet people at and take them at their word for this is what they need, and we should meet what their needs are to the degree that is possible. And when we run into situations where, let's say, we don't have enough resources at that moment for everyone who wants them from that thing to be able to get information so that we can follow up with them and make sure that we get it, so that we're not doing that same thing. Because if you need something, whatever it is, money, protective equipment, whatever, if you need something tomorrow and the first thing that you have to do is fill out 3 forms so that 17 strangers can decide whether or not you deserve to get this thing, and then they give you half the stuff you need, what's the point? And why should you, as someone who's in that position, even sort of present yourself to these people as a potential solution for what they need? If anything, you're almost like a stumbling block to getting what they actually need. So I think that's a huge component to that as well. Just making sure that you don't, as you're doing it, you're not putting yourself in a different category of person who gets to decide who or what gets to go where.
Yeah. I want to add that mutual aid trusts people with their experience and trusts what they need. And it also trusts community to know their own solutions. They don't need an outsider to come in and tell them this is what you need. This will solve the issue of the community. The community knows. They just need the resources to show up, or they need folks that are listening, that are going to try to leverage whatever they have, whether it's time, money, space, to items to get them what they need.
Something that's coming to mind for me in the conversation of responding to the immediate needs and kind of the limitations of the nonprofit industrial complex is the necessity in the nonprofit world to have a very pre-planned agenda of what your plan is, and to have a breakdown of where did the money go, how much went to this thing, how much went to this thing. Whereas my understanding in mutual aid, one of the advantages is that there's an ability to adapt to the emergent needs that arise out of crisis, out of who knows. Does anybody want to speak a little bit to maybe how, in your experience, your mutual aid network has been able to adapt to arising needs as they come up?
There was one time we got during Washington now has a similar fire season as to California now. And in 2021, there was really horrific fires that were impacting the lower Yakima Valley, which is the biggest, where the majority of our farms are. Like 75% of American hops, for an example, come from there. And we got a phone call from one of our community organizers out there, and Katie, and she was like, there is no more water in the entire Yakima Valley because the water there is gray water, and so it is not safe to drink from the tap. And there was absolutely no water to be purchased anywhere within the hour plus that there is in the valley. So to then immediately organize and connect with like other organizations of like, who else do you have people that are already delivering stuff? And like, just like, thank goodness for cell phones, everyone just rapid organizing to like text and just get water delivered out there. And literally having people, this is so frustrating because if they had a clean tap water, this wouldn't be an issue. Having to drive to Costco to buy Costco stuff in Seattle, to then get it to drive across town to someone who's going to drive to Yakima at 4 in the morning. So that way by 7 a.m., farm workers will have a clean water bottle before they go out into the fields.
Yeah, what a good example. Do others have anything to add?
Yeah, so SF Bay Area Mutual Aid, it's a mouthful, but our group started like early days of the pandemic, and we are still, I think, as far as I know, one of the only groups in the Bay Area doing direct financial assistance. So there was an eviction moratorium that was put in place, at some point in California, and then the state as a whole, and then there were city-specific ones as well. But those oftentimes do not extend to undocumented folks, or even if they do, even if they do, a lot of times the people that we were hearing from were undocumented and were still being like harassed by their landlords, or just were fearful of like trying to exercise their rights for obvious reasons. So we were able to mobilize our direct financial aid network to oftentimes support those people who were like, I think that if I can't make rent by tomorrow, I'm going to be evicted. Or like my landlord has told me that they're going to evict me, or that they are otherwise going to continue harassing me or making my living situation untenable until I pay whatever amount in rent. So we were able to mobilize the financial resources that we had available at the time to respond really quickly to a lot of those requests.
Incredible. Thank you. That's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have anything really new to add. It's just that it's good to hear this is what other mutual aid groups have been able to do. Like what we've been able to do at Feed the Block is kind of just talk to each other and be like, okay, where do we think the need needs to go to next? We just finished a huge winter distro that was super fun and really uplifting. And it was, even though we do try to like be accountable to each other where like our funds are going and stuff like that. Um, it's like if we need more money for tents or if we need more money for sleeping pads, and we're easily able to just funnel that somewhere that where it needs to be. And so that's been a complete flip side of charities, which tend to just kind of want to do the one thing over and over again. So yeah, nothing to add, but to like uplift that theme.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One thing I'm wanting to maybe hear a little bit more about is what makes mutual aid mutual. Can I hear a little bit more about, because I think, the charity structure or even like any like helping structure is really from the mentality of there is a helper and there is one that is helping. Wait, there's a helper and there's one that is receiving help. Um, and I think, mutual aid really breaks that standard. So can anyone speak to the horizontal structure here and like how not only the communities that you serve are enriched by your ability to respond to their needs, but also how they've responded to your needs as the one who might more traditionally be seen as like the one in power?
I can speak to that, and if that's okay. For
Mhm.
with us supporting and like or in being in solidarity with farm workers, first and foremost, they feed us. Like us participating in their social justice movement is like honestly the very least we can do in saying thank you for the people who feed us every day, regardless of the time of year and the weather and everything. They're out there, snow, smoke, rain, heat. So that is a beginning core principle, but also especially when it came to recently in Washington State is the only state right now, I believe, that has rules around heat stress, meaning like what are the rules of protection for anyone who works outside? And it started coming specifically from the farm worker social justice movement within Washington and demanding for there to be protections for those who work outside. And then folks in urban areas were like, wait a minute, other people work outside like park rangers and construction workers and tour guides and people at Pike Place Market, and it like people are starting to make the connection of like if it's a law that protects a farm worker, it's a law that protects me as well. And so like seeing that shift starting to happen, and also very similar conversations right now going around smoke rules, and this is all through Washington L&I, and since they have like a public participatory process. So getting folks to participate in that participatory process, and also them starting to realize when there were people who were in asking questions in bad faith, or were like clearly they're speaking for the agro businesses rather than the workers. Like, hey, does a 15-minute break count if they're in their car commuting from point A, point 4 to point B in the business? Like, and having people push back, be like, no, that's not a break. They are still working. Just because they have air conditioning doesn't mean it's a break. And so people starting to make those connections that like that is worker solidarity. And that was a way that we can participate on a statewide level. Like you might live in Seattle and never get to go to the not Rainier Valley, go to the Lower Yakima Valley or Whatcom, but like your participation in that is protecting that worker and yourself.
Beautifully put. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to this question. I think mutual aid and the idea of reciprocity is oftentimes, I think, needs to be challenged a little bit more, right? And I think with Feed the Block, we are serving our houseless folks, and we're serving folks that are often in the cruxes of the most marginalized positions, right, in this state and in this system. And so for us, we believe that, meeting the basic needs and the liberation of the most marginalized people, which is often Black and Brown folks, is going to lead to the liberation of all oppressed people, right? And so for us, we see our liberation tied within our houseless folks and for folks of that identity. But we often talk about how can we ensure that our houseless folks, it's a reciprocal action, right? But also how are we asking folks to give us something at that moment, right? Where they're unable to, or they maybe don't have the resources. But for us, we have been working on doing some type of community platform where our houseless folks can also share their skills with our larger community. So we've been doing a lot of art specific. We've had conversations about having our houseless folks come and kind of gear that conversation, if it's a political education, if it's more of just like a talk. And also we've just had thrown around different ideas of how our houseless folks can actually join in our organization, right? And lead the efforts because they're the ones who know what is needed, right? At that better than all of us do. And so I think on the people that we serve, there's that kind of tension that's always there of, it being reciprocal completely, right? And this is messy conversation. So I think it's something that definitely needs to be brought up. But in terms of like actual mutual aid organizations, we are all really reciprocal in the region of like, we always say like we're passing around the same $20 just to somebody who needs it at a different moment. And so for us and our networks, we're able to provide resources to each other in a way that really is reciprocal in nature. But I always think that mutual aid orgs need to be more conscious, and we should be more conscious of that reciprocal aspect, right? And really push it in a direction. And maybe sometimes it's not reciprocal in that moment, but it doesn't mean that it isn't reciprocal in general. So yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that. And I think just really breaking down the expert mentality here. And I think asserting that like reciprocity is not necessarily transactional. Well, is inherently non-transactional. And that it's not like you give me this, I give you that, but rather that all members involved in this community, including like the ones that are participants in the mutual aid and those that are receiving things from the mutual aid, are all sharing skills and expertise. Something that I think we definitely want to talk to, so I'm just going to like open us up to start talking about it now. I don't have the most beautiful question here, but it's the week after the inauguration. This is our first messy conversation since the inauguration happened due to MLK holiday on that day as well. So let's talk about it. And it was very intentional that we timed this conversation to happen following the inauguration. How do you see mutual aid as a response to the current and forthcoming changes in this country?
If I can go first, sorry, just because um I want to say that specifically with Feed the Block, we've been addressing every administration's,
Mhm.
like this is nothing new to many Black and brown people. And so I think continuing what we do is able to, I mean, we benefit from it because more people now are showing up to volunteer because they want to feel like they
Mhm.
want to do something, and that's good. And then, of course, we've had conversations with ourselves about how do we also provide the political education side of it so people don't just feel like, oh, I'm doing this to feel better about myself. Um, so so yeah, but continuing to do it is it's a continual fight against the powers that be. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there.
I appreciate that answer quite a lot.
Yeah, I'm echoing a lot of what Dom just said. The thing that slowed down for us during, like my group specifically was started during the last Trump administration, and nothing changed during Biden's administration except the number of people that were involved. Like that's really the only thing that
Yep.
that changed. Not to say that there aren't some like new horrors happening every day, but I just like for our group, it's like the last administration's immigration policies were like, sorry, I'm trying not to curse. They were terrible. They were terrible. It was nothing got better in that regard. And a lot of the people that my group is working with, as I mentioned, a lot of folks who are undocumented and a lot of folks that are, if they're not undocumented, are still dealing with some aspect of our terrible immigration system. Like for them, it was not really like anything was different. So yeah, I'm hoping that I would love to know what Feed the Block is doing actually around political education, because I think that's a great point. Like we have all of a sudden a lot of folks who want to join, and what we saw during the pandemic was like huge outpouring of interest, and then as soon as like people started going back to work and things started, like you could go out to dinner again, like people started falling off. And so keeping people engaged, I think, there's a lot of things that go into that, but one of them is making sure that the reason that you're giving people to be a part of the group is not just like you have a momentary, feel good party for yourself, but that you're actually like part of something bigger. I think a lot of people are looking for that. Sorry, the sun is really aggressive right now. A lot of people are looking for that, and I want to see how we can engage people in a way that does that. But it's challenging when you're trying to juggle a million things at once.
Yeah.
I was talking about this before the conversation. I think similar to what everyone's saying, like in some aspects, it didn't change anything. But the one thing that is shifting that I feel like is necessary to talk about is safety. Safety of our members, volunteer members, safety of community. One thing we, and we've never like shown pictures of faces unless it was explicitly granted permission. With anyone under 18, it's the back of the head or their hands, unless we have like granted permission from their adults. And then, but now it's all, and we also like, when we first started this, we would be gathering all these materials and taking them across the state. So like to make sure people actually trusted us and taking their donations and taking it, we would take pictures of the trunks of the car and the volunteer and like post it like that they're going now. And like one of the things that I feel inclined to do is like either no longer be posting pictures or just be posting pictures of just the items, not even the cars. Like just thinking that's something that I know that myself and the other WashMask members are going to have a conversation of like, what do we need to do and what do we need to put in writing so any volunteer comes in knows these are the things that are guaranteed. Like one of the big things that I noticed like in the change and that I'm hoping that people remember is like masking and just remembering that like a lot of we also have several members that have very ability whether or not that they can get sick because they might have a chronic illness or they might have someone at home who is immunocompromised. And so having to just have that re-education again sometimes can be a little difficult, but I feel like again, as people are starting to lean in again, I think just how do we then have the conversation of like, we don't just lean in when it's dire, we lean in because it's a practice. And like, how do we make it a practice for folks? But yeah, practice and safety. Those are the two things that like with the big shift in the administration that are on my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also thinking about the ability of mutual aid organizations uniquely to do something like that, to reinstate and like I guess like remind us of the importance of things like COVID precautions. Um, because of so many, I think about like the funding and even in a nonprofit organization, the requirement to continue, appeasing your audience and creating a palatable culture. I think mutual aids are uniquely positioned to be able to practice dissent in that way. I'm curious if anyone would like to speak a little bit about sustainability of the mutual aid. Not, I mean, I guess any definition of that word, but I'm also specifically asking about burnout and how do we sustain involvement of participants.
Yeah, I can go, but I wanted to give space to Ayani if you wanted to add anything before I go. I was like, I know because I be yapping a lot. But for us, there's like two parts that I wanted to touch on. Going back to Sarah's question, which I'll do after I answer the question about sustainability. I think for us, it's really beautiful to hear that all these other organizations, or at least two out of the three, maybe all three, were born in 2020. And that they've been able to sustain themselves for going on 5 years. So for our organization, we are one of the only mutual aid orgs that were born in the uprisings that is still active today. And so part of the reason why is that we kind of are really against capitalism. We're against this idea of producing. And we know that the need is really high. But we also need to check in with ourselves and check in with us as an organization and also stay disciplined. I think that is like a crucial word and a crucial practice that our mutual aid org has, and just the politics that we follow, this aspect of discipline. We know that we're not going to be able to, we don't want to follow every urge to meet every single need that is there because we're going to burn ourselves out. And that's exactly what the system wants us to do. So for us, we've created a kind of a process that we're able to not only check in with ourselves and determine our own capacity, and we communicate very often about our members, ourselves, our capacity, and how much we can contribute to our organization at any said time. So our capacity is always changing. And so we are, our events also kind of change and go with the flow. So there are some days, and there were, up until we added like a new set of new members, our organization was kind of dark a little bit. We had a few months where we were all just like, life is lifing. We need to just like relax and just take care of ourselves, because we can't organize and help other people if we're not, at our best capacity. And so that's kind of how we've, been able to kind of sustain ourselves, is building on this, building on our capacity and really being honest and transparent about our capacity to not only ourselves, but our community. And then our capacity was able to like build up, and so that we've been able to add 2 sets of new members. So we've been, adding and extending our members, and now we're at a capacity where we're able to do bi-weekly distros. And so, we're kind of building up,
Wow.
right? And so we're seeing it as a marathon instead of a sprint, because we want to be here for as long as the needs are unfulfilled. And we don't want to be here for, we don't want to burn ourselves out so fast. So I think the main thing is just being honest and transparent and checking in with capacity and being okay. Like, it's okay that you can't do a distro every single day of the week, that's not, yeah. So that's kind of how our org operates a little bit, and how we're able to sustain ourselves for the last 5 years.
I think similarly, we also, I think, mostly got put together 2020. I think something that's very, very important for sustainability is also to whoever you're organizing with, like, take care of each other. Um, that's like a really big one, and also like creating a culture where people are held accountable, but also don't feel like they are being held to the fire at all points. And creating an environment so that it's very easy for people to easy and comfortable and safe for people to be like, I said I was going to do this thing. Um, 24 hours have passed, and now circumstances are extremely different.
Mhm.
I'm someone who doesn't have particularly continual work, and sometimes when I get work, it might be for 12 days in a row, 12-hour shifts. So I'll say, yeah, I can do that. I can write that silly little email or whatever. And then tomorrow I can't. And like being able to just kind of come to the whatever chat you're using or to whoever and say like, hey, I gotta sort of abdicate this because things are different. Um, I think another one too is we really encourage people to be at least somewhat involved in like other organizations. So if we are in like a lull or there's not so much going on that we don't need, like if you feel like there's other stuff going on that you want to put your head towards a little bit more um, within another organizing space, like that is a great thing. Especially if it's like, yeah, like during the middle of the winter and stuff, like not as much stuff going on for us usually. So like, yeah, you want to get involved in something else that seems really cool, and also encouraging people like exploring side projects and kind of other ways we can use the power, the methodologies we've developed, and sort of the networks we have to do something that is not exactly the same as what we're doing currently and what we're like the most involved in. And I think that's awesome. They don't always like pan out, but like if you can get someone, I think one of the to like be engaged with like, oh, what if we also were able to meet this thing? And even if we find out that like, wow, that's somewhat outside of our capabilities or what, like that's all good. That's fine. It's better to have explored and learned and taken that and used our efforts to grow a little bit more. Um, I think that that's often a better thing. And also a huge one is as part of like creating that culture is like really trying to be as open as possible with all decisions. We have it's kind of sounds silly, but we have like a tiered structure for like how important a decision is. So during meetings, like, are we just doing is mostly thumbs up acceptable for us to move on with this? Do we want to do a fully anonymous poll? Do we want to do a fully anonymous poll that only moves on with 100% consensus? Like, and having that so that you don't ever feel like people are being steamrolled, and so that there's, yeah, it's really helpful actually, even though it sounds a little bit silly. And then another big one is also just like if there are like issues of you know, differences in opinion or organizing, like really making sure that there's an environment that's open for people to discuss that, even if they feel more comfortable doing it anonymously or whatever, so that you don't end up in this like telephone chain of people trying to figure out what's going on, which can you know, undermines trust. And that's not, you know, we shouldn't be here trying to replicate, you know, the unfortunate actions of the way things work in the, you know, the workplace and things like that. We really ought to be trying to, as much as possible, be engaging with each other um, as equals. So I think all of those things are really important for sustainability. You know, to sum it up very quickly, it helps if if you're organizing with people who are like you like and are friendly and are nice to be around. Um, yeah.
Yes, and that, and then I think also we've been really deliberate in trying to, like I said, creative joy is a big part, but like not and some of the ways we've done that is like gathering books and stuff, but it's also like going directly out into the community and getting to like do art stuff with them, whether it is like we've done plays, we've done art workshops, art in the park. We've also got the community to come to Seattle. We had 100 farm workers and their families come to Seattle and see a play, and that was a really beautiful and special day. We've also done like virtual performances and things like that, but also for our members, volunteers, like we have a lot of us are artists, so we do fundraising concerts. And so just like getting to be together in community and like listening to music, listening to each other play and like see each other's like other skills is like really awesome. And just and I things we've done in the past too, we did like a volunteer picnic, right, Sien? Like we did like a volunteer picnic and we did like a big potluck just as a way to like say, hey, like we appreciate each other. And then also just finding ways. One of the other things we do is at all our events is try to have a card making table. So like inviting people to like write a card to a farm worker or either a letter of solidarity or a thank you card. So it gets you to start thinking in that way of like, what does it mean to thank someone who feeds you? And just getting folks who are just sitting around the table and like they're drawing together. It's just like finding ways of like, how can we just talk and hang out human to human? So it's not just like our heads are down and we have to get this work done. It's not about that. It's about that like we can take care of each other and it feels like and we like being around each other, like you said, Ayani.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to something really important here, and like really transformative to my own experience as someone who's involved with mutual aid, and specifically involved with WashMasks as well. Some of our art weeks, boy, what was it called? I don't know, just like creative joy. I don't know. We were like in,
I was art in
go
the
ahead.
park, the one in Grandview.
Yeah, that was so cool. Like
That
probably
was
one of the
good.
best weeks of my life. And I think that's just this like speaking so much to the mutual part of mutual aid that we were talking about before, because like the skill sharing opportunity that came from that week, which was a week that just some of us artists went down or up or east or something to Grandview.
Yeah,
Where is that?
and half of us were from Seattle and like half were
Hmm.
from the area and like some of those
Right.
and so doing that, we've also done like an art mentorship so that way youth from those areas can start feeling more confident in leading their own art. So it's not just about us bringing art, it's just that recognizing that they have it themselves. So yeah, those just having conversations that have nothing, I think that was really big for us. Nothing to do with COVID, nothing to do with school, nothing to do with work. Like
Mhm.
this is just about sitting together as a community and getting to be creative.
Yeah, which was just such a prime embodiment of community care, I think. And I just think about like the things that I learned that week from the farm workers that were able to attend. So I'm curious, can others share anything about your involvement with mutual aid that's kind of shaped your perspective on community care? And also, I guess, like how you bring that into your everything else besides organizing. How has this impacted your life ethos?
So something that I think about a lot because we have this direct financial aid program, which is not the only thing we do, but is something that I've been like all of the people involved in the mutual aid group kind of like have their thing that they're focused on. So we all do everything, but I'm focused on the financial aid program. So I'm like seeing a lot of requests from people all the time for whatever. Most of the time it's like for rent or medical bills, a lot of requests for medical or like ongoing medical care. And then sometimes people will make requests that are like for things that I think would not be qualified as necessities, or actually more often what we get are like people who are I think have clearly been conditioned to think that they need to justify their requests in some way, which we do not ask people to do. But you know, they'll be like, "Oh, I really need this to pay rent." One person sent me unsolicited, sent me a photo of a letter that she got from her landlord, like demanding a certain amount of money. And we have never required that of anybody that's made a request. And that's something that I think has really been something that I realized that I wanted to be practicing more in every part of my life was radical trust. So I think actually Lana brought this up earlier, like the idea that when people are stating what they need, that you just believe them. And so when people are like, I need money for rent, I'm not like, prove that you live in a place, you know, like I don't, I'm not going to ask them to prove that they need it for rent. And we don't ask for any follow-up confirmation that that's what they actually spent the money on either. And when we're training new people, like I've gotten the question a lot, like, how do you know that they're spending money on XYZ? And I'm like, I don't. And I am certain that people have gotten money and they have not spent it on whatever they said they were going to spend it on. Like, and that's just part of it. And there's no way, like, without requiring a ton of documentation from people, there's no way for me to check that, right? But the reality is, like we've been talking about the nonprofit industrial complex, when people give money to a nonprofit, they're not asking those questions. Like if they're donating to, and like I've worked in, you know, the nonprofit industrial complex, and the donations that come in, like, sure, you hope that a lot of them are spent on whatever the programs are that the nonprofit's running, but they're also spending money on like the stuff that we would call non-essential, like they're buying t-shirts for people for like a staff retreat or something, right? Like they're spending money on stuff that's not the thing that people were trying to donate towards. But there's no like accountability there. It's not like people, like the nonprofit's not turning around and to their donors and being like, thank you so much for that $100 you sent us for our food program. We actually spent it on t-shirts. You know, like that's not happening, and nobody seems to have a problem with that. But when you talk about mutual aid groups or like direct, like person to person donations, there tends to be like distrust that comes up. So working through that in myself has been something that has been really rewarding. And now it's something that I try to, when I'm onboarding new people, I'm just really honest about it. Like, yeah, we don't know where, you know, like, yeah, maybe people are scamming us. I don't know. But if people are requesting this money, I assume that they actually need it. And however they use it is up to them. But I am assuming they're requesting because they have a real need. And that's the extent of it.
I love that. Yeah, radical trust. Yeah. I also want to open us up and continue talking about whatever we want to talk about, but also open us up to anybody who is attending today who might have questions that they want to bring to the table. We did get one question in the chat so far that was about discussing how resources are gathered. What a basic thing that we never actually talked about. So does anyone want to share a little bit about how the structure of your organization has gone about actually gathering the necessities that are then distributed?
Yeah, so I can go ahead and answer. So our organization is completely grassroots. So we are still functioning based off of community funding. And so the way that we receive funding is we will put like a wish list together, or we'll kind of outline what the items we are looking to buy that our houseless folks have asked for. And then we'll put it on, on Instagram, on social media. And then we actually just receive physical, we either receive physical donations, depending on kind of what it is, like for clothing, and stuff like that. We do hold like drives where people can actually physically give us stuff. But most of the time, all of our funds just come through Venmo, Zelle, Cash App. We just get, actual cash donations. And so we're completely funded by our community, which presents challenges as we're unsure of how much we're going to receive every single distro and stuff, but we're completely community funded, and so we really rely on our community, literally just helping our other members of our community, and that's how we've been able to function. We've gotten a few grants, but the problem with grants is that you have to have a 501c3 status to receive money. So we found a few that have given us money, but other than that, just completely community, funded.
The majority of the donations we deal with are not fiscal. It's like winter clothing, masks. So some of it is partnering with other mutual aids, like Mask Block Seattle. They have given us like, I think probably easily 10,000 masks and thousands of rapid COVID tests. They're incredible. And then also just partnering very deliberately with different, like I said, a lot of us are artists. So it's like partnering with different arts organizations of like inviting and making it a part of their programming. So they invite their patrons to also like bring those sun hats, or bring that those food items. We've started partnering more and more with since we started working with educators. Some of our volunteers are also educators as well, and so they have asked us to like come to their school and speak to their school about mutual aid, and that has led to having some donation drives being led by their social justice club or by their student council, and just like having these youth lead it, which has been really powerful, of like how much like food they've gathered. And like we've talked about like what does it mean to do culturally specific food, and what's the importance of like honoring and bringing the food that people asked for, not just like what you have, because then it will actually be eaten. We've also partnered just like with winter clothing. We partnered with a yarn shop, and this yarn shop has like a huge crafting community around it, and they make a lot of their crafters make like the most beautiful, colorful, handmade like socks, sweaters, hats. And so like, of course, that's who we're going to partner with for winter clothing. Like these people are already making them, and they want to feel like what they're making has purpose. And so just being really smart with that as well, of just trying to be really deliberate of like, who are we partnering with, and when, and what time of year, and why, and so just having those conversations. Some of small business owners in Seattle, one of them is Sopan and Oliver's Twist, their restaurant owner, Karuna. Like within the first week of us being on Instagram, he reached out and he's like, I'm a son of refugees. Like this matters to me, and like I'm here. And so like just there are some folks that they're like, I don't have stuff to give you, but I can give you space, and you can keep a donation box here, and they'll put a sign in their window, and so people know that that's the local donation spot in their neighborhood. So just trying to make sure we have a presence in different parts of town. So that's how we've functioned a lot. But and what I feel like has really helped us in that is that it creates conversation. So like, yes, we did have like a down point of volunteers. We did have a dip of volunteers, but I realize now it wasn't incredibly drastic. And I think it's because we had these community conversations in place, and people, and especially our small businesses that we partnered with, they were like, no, like we keep a box year round for WashMasks because we are thinking about farm workers year round. And so like just having those things have really helped us. And then also people being like, oh, oh, my church can do this. And just like having people realize like wherever your community is that you can go and get some items and bring it in, like every little bit and every little contribution is a ripple. Like everyone thinks what they donate is so little, but like when you gather it all together, it's massive.
Mhm. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. And we've got Clarence, you've got your hand raised. And then we've got a question from Asa after that.
Sure. I really have more of a comment than a question. I wanted to applaud
Mhm.
those of you who expressed earlier that you don't, allow helicoptering into community. You allow community to express what they actually need, and then you pivot to those needs, even if it means rearranging what your focus is in some areas. So I really think that's really a wonderful, wonderful aspect of your organizations. I wanted to say to Michaela, in the case of you raising funds as a non 501c3, you do know you can collaborate with another community based organization who is a 501c3 to be your fiduciary, with that radical trust factor involved. So I want to offer that. And also, I kind of experienced something earlier today. I mean, probably some of you on here may have too, but I was on Instagram earlier and I saw a celebrity who was unpacking her car because she had rushed to a shelter for the fire relief here in LA. And she had loaded her car with all of this stuff and they couldn't use any of it. So she had to come back home with all of this stuff. And then she said, please, everybody, call first before you go. Call first, because it's really what you should do. You should ask people what they need, what they want, and how you can be of service without really assuming that what you have to bring to the table is what is actually, warranted or necessary or even wanted. So, I applaud you guys for those factors. So thank you.
I think that's massive and like such a tenet of white supremacy that I think a lot of us, all of us probably have internalized. Am I frozen? I realized I might be frozen.
No,
Am I
you're
back?
good. You're good.
Oh, okay. That's fun. That had happened in a second ago. Anyway, um, yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And then I think Asa also had a question to pose.
Yeah, thank you. It was very closely related to what Clarence said, actually. And, as we were planning this conversation like over a month ago, and Sien proposed it, it was before the fires. And that was such a strong example of the power of mutual aid organizations. I think everyone here in LA saw that before there were any nonprofits or government organizations aiding. I mean, outside of like emergency services, mutual aid groups were first on the scene and providing a lot of the necessary help. And it just made me think about the increasing need for that sort of readiness in every community that we're seeing from climate change fueled disasters. And I wonder how your groups think about this. Like, is it built into kind of, it's already there in what your org does? Or are there ways that you're looking at kind of disasters, coming disasters, and changing your approach at all? I mean, I think there's, in some ways, you can see like there's just a slow, ongoing disaster all the time in our urban areas, but not just urban areas. Sorry, everywhere. But yeah, I think that's enough. I can clarify more if needed.
I can speak to that a little bit. At CHC right now, we're in the process of sort of developing, not like the disaster plan, but more like disaster plans for what you do when something happens near you. What do you do when something happens right where you're at? And what do you do with something like in the case of the LA fire? Well, like, obviously we're pretty far away, but like what can we do to support, and what is our sort of action plan? Because a number of us were, kind of like I said before, involved in efforts to get aid down there, and I think we were effective in literally like amongst the random group of people who are like all tangentially related somehow to mutual aid in the Bay Area. We're able to get a couple of cars and trucks down there within a day and a half, maybe even earlier than that. So like that is very, very impressive. But the plan there was really just a bunch of people hopped on Signal, and actually then realized, oh my God, probably we need a lot more help to do this. And then a lot more people hopped on Signal, and then 5 Signal chats got made, and then everything kind of like ballooned out from there, and there was no real regard for like, do we all actually have the energy to do this, or like, what are we doing in terms of, are we just sending cars down into the inferno and being like, I don't know, trying to find a spot, you'll get there, or are we like actually like, how can we actually support them, and then also like what are our different organizations abilities, and kind of things that exist that we can, utilize. Like, for example, one of the people who we were organizing with they're sort of in like a more dormant phase, but had like a very expansive like email list from past organizing and stuff. So they, as their organization, were able to be like, hey, we are accepting these donations, just blast out. And then we'll figure out from there. But like knowing that someone has that capability within your community and has access to those things are really important, so that you can sort of like plan exactly what, not exactly, because you can't really plan exactly, but to plan sort of a basic approach to what action you might take. Yeah, and also just to also be clear, we've talked a lot about like established networks and things like that. Like that is a perfect example. That was 5 people that became 25 people in 48 hours, just kind of chatting on Signal. And if like, quite honestly, if someone like a chucklefuck like me can get a car down to LA in 24-ish hours with aid that is appropriate, needed, and wanted to the situation, then like there's an insane amount that you can do. And mostly what I was doing was texting people and making phone calls in between breaks at work. So there is like a tremendous capability you can do even when you're going completely ad hoc. So being able to develop a plan too, I just imagine. I have to imagine for now because we didn't have a plan, but imagine.
I would also say when it comes, some things are unfortunately becoming seasonal. Like I said, Washington now has a fire season, like California. So like now it's just about preparing ourselves and like talking more directly with our rural community partners of like, what do you need from us? What are your anticipatories this year? Like, what do you think? How can we support? And also just to give us enough time so we can pivot if anything else happens. One of the biggest things, like we were talking about, like trusting community and talking to community, is also recognizing different community styles of communication. A lot of the organizations we partner with, very similar, they have like consensus or horizontal style consent agreements that happen, but also they work at a different pace than we do. Like we don't want to think there's a huge like cultural difference of like the way we talk in a city or in the way we could like communicate and get things done in a city versus rural areas, but there's other things happening in a rural area, like, and especially for a lot of those wraparound services, they do ELL and like narcotics counseling and citizenship classes, and they also run like the free preschool. So like you're not going to be their first priority. So what you can do is start the conversation and allow time, like with time, to make sure people have time to gather what they need in terms of pondering that question so they can get back to you in time. So just planning ahead has been a big conversation among WashMasks. Is like, do we need to plan 3 weeks ahead? No, that's not enough time. We need a month. Okay, no, that's not enough time. We need 2 months. And just starting to set things up. And also just having conversations of like, how do we have conversations around preventing heat stress, and like how do we do that? And so like we've also had community events where we invite our rural partners to come to the city, and they come and they speak directly to the communities here in Seattle to talk about like these are ways that like you can show up, these are ways, this is the things that is happening in your state right now that you should know that's happening. And also if it's happening to workers out here, it's going to happen to workers in the city as well. And so just sharing those experiences and resources of like, what do you do when someone collapses from heat? That might not be information that's shared here in Seattle that might be pretty common, but that's something that in agricultural areas, people do know how to respond because they have to. And so like, again, another that conversation, like what Michaela said of that reciprocity of like just sharing that information and also acknowledging that like we need to be prepared. So how do we help each other to be prepared for it? Whether it is like creating an event together, we've talked also about like creating zines and stuff. And so like things, a way to get also youth excited and involved in their communities, realizing that they can participate.
Beautiful. I'm noticing the time, and we traditionally around this time, well, around 6 minutes ago, rather try to transition to a less formal continuation of this conversation for anyone who's available to stick around. But of course, if 5 o'clock was your cutoff, goodbye. Thank you for being here. But yeah, I feel that this conversation still has some fire in it. So continue.
I actually do. I have to go back to work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you all. And I'm actually, before I go though, I am going to put my, not my email, the group's email in the chat. And I like really welcome anyone who is interested in learning more about our group or just to like continue the conversation. Like, would love to know what Feed the Block is doing with political education. So yeah, everyone is welcome to email me.
Beautiful. Yes, I did want to add that if anyone has a lot of you are in San Francisco, which I know not most of our audience is, but if anybody does have any specific calls to action of ways to get involved, I think we could totally share those out as well.
Yeah, and thank you for putting this together also. This is really fun. It's always, I love talking to other mutual aid groups. So really appreciate the platform.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate this as well. It looks like Sarah Beth has something to share.
Yeah, I thank you all for being here. This is really interesting, and I love that you're defining the way you work, and that even though you're probably doing very different things, it has such a similar feel to it as you describe the way that you're doing what you're doing. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic seeing a lot of organizations, or at least what looked like an organization, starting up on social media with, let us know what you need, and wondering, what? Like, wow, that's so interesting. And I think about seeing the evolution of those and how many have dropped off. But also, I'm curious now with the safety issues that I think the political situation is posing, and also hearing about some of the other modes of communication that organizations use that are now being monitored by the FBI and other groups. I'm curious, how do you get people who want to connect? How do they find you? How do they know about you? What kind of communication is easiest for you? If we encounter in our classrooms as faculty students who are curious about organizations that do the things you're doing, how do we connect them, and how do we help people find their way to all of these kinds of efforts?
Yeah, this is juicy. And I will say, before we all were joined by others, we were talking about Meta and how I think all of us, I believe all of us have relied on Meta, like Facebook and Instagram, to spread the word, and how that is really shifting. Maybe we are, having the thoughts about that shifting, but not much plan or decisions about how that is shifting yet. So adding that context to your question as well. Yeah, feel free, anyone, to answer that.
Yeah, if I could say something, we don't do any organizing over Instagram. Um, we use a third-party encrypting app, a messaging app that does that. So, but we do have like kind of a vetting process for new members, and it requires them to show up to some political ed um,
Mm.
Zooms, yeah, that we do. Or actually, not even Zooms. I think we're doing a different product than Zoom also. Um, but yeah, so we keep all the organizing off of those sites since we know that they are collecting our information. They have been collecting our information for quite some time. But in terms of actually letting our neighbors know, like when we're going to be doing distros and stuff like that, we've started relying on flyering and then asking other comrades that we meet in the streets to like, hey, pass the word along. I think actually we just decided to have because we were talking to some of our hosteless comrades and they were kind of talking about how we can best like reach them or like for them to know like when we're going to be someplace, and we decided to like have set in stone when our distributions are happening, stuff like that. So that seems to have been
Yeah.
helpful. But yeah, when it comes to onboarding new people and stuff like that, there's a bit more of a process that requires because yeah, ops are out there. So
Yeah, the physical world. Thank you for reintroducing that idea.
We have like reading material that we ask folks to read that in our volunteer folder, and one of them is the legal handbook on mutual aid that a bunch of lawyers did at the start of the pandemic. They kind of created like an open source book that we use to reference a lot that we have like annotations in. Um, and we also have a code of conduct that like if you're signing up to volunteer, this is the code of conduct that you are expected. Like specifically around masking, photos, like all of other people, just like all that. But yeah, and a lot of us like have long-term relationships with each other. Like I said, a lot of us are artists, so we all know each other. And a lot of the times when there's new folks coming in, they're coming with like having volunteered or worked with other folks, so they come with like references. So that's how we've done it. We've done some organizing over like Signal and WhatsApp. But we also do a lot just like over email, which is probably not the best, but but we're working with like the way that we can. And also when speaking with our rural community, often like a lot of it is like phone, just like directly talking on the phone or over Zoom, just because we're far away from each other. And in letting the community know, often we are using Meta, or we're partnering with one of our rural communications, so they have like a text message distribution list, or they have a newsletter like they have, or if they talk directly to the folks who are coming into their community centers. So so it's a mix of all that as well.
Also want to comment that depending on who you're organizing with and the nature of your project, there's kind of like a different risk assessment and threat model. Um,
Mm.
we recently at CHC kind of came to the conclusion that we have, at least with the core things we're doing, moving masks around. That might change, but as it stands now, moving masks around and air purifiers is pretty low legal risk and probably pretty low priority risk for anyone who wants to just be a disruptive jerk. Um, that being said, that's not true for all the people who we organize with, and that's not true with all the organizations that we do partner with. So one of the things is like for internal stuff, we use Discord because it's easy. It's really, it's got all the stuff in there. Um, we keep basically any private information off of that for obvious reasons. We don't do any outreach to other organizations, even if they do have a Discord or something. We don't do that there. Usually, if they're fine with email, we'll do email. We try to keep everything essentially that is outgoing to Signal, especially if it's like directly about a project. Um, and then one of the things that we do that is really good practice for both privacy and just for keeping a nice clean looking inbox, is that like as soon as since we also field like direct requests, you can get online and literally just email us, hey, I need 50 masks, and we'll get you them. As soon as that's like met and we're like, okay, all good, delete everything. And then also we keep no plain text data of anybody's addresses or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
The general operating philosophy is that if you can encrypt it, and if you can't encrypt it, then don't touch it, don't keep it. The safest data is no data. Which, it does present a challenge if you're trying to like reach a bunch of people, true, but also at the same time, like I would feel awful if we were the ones responsible for some kind of data breach just because a couple people wanted to download or like, donate KN95 masks in 2022. That would be awful.
Before we move on, I
Yeah.
actually have to head out, so I just wanted to thank everybody and thank y'all for hosting this space. Peace out.
Thank you so much. And then David.
Yeah, well, first, I just want to thank everybody for participating and sharing your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, and also for the good work you're doing in the world. So thank you for being with us. Um, I know that this work that there's a history to the work, and we referenced it a little bit throughout Indigenous and the Panthers and Zapatistas and others. I just wonder if any of you could point to anything from that history that you draw on that informs your work or your attitude towards your work or strategies that you use. Have you learned anything from those elders?
I can start. So our entire organization, it was co-founded with myself and another Black organizer. And so both of us are centered in Pan-Africanist organizing, and we follow the Black Panther Party. Specifically, we created our organization based off of the survival programs. So for us, it is a direct linkage of, our ancestors, and also just, what's happening now and bringing that into a contemporary model. And so we're really based off of, in that specific form, the Panthers, and even in our organization in general, and the politics that we follow is a lot more militant and disciplined, which is also directly linked to the Zapatistas and also to the Panthers. And so I know we've mentioned, or Dom has mentioned, like the vetting process and onboarding. We do have a not necessarily rigorous as the Panthers were. I believe they were like 6 months to a year of onboarding to become a member. For us, it's about a few months, but we do have political education. We do have a vetting process. We do wish to, know who these people are, and we want to see an act of discipline, political discipline. And so in order to become a member, all these different steps have to be completed. And so, those are our direct ties and linkage, and we really see ourselves as just an extension of these principles in politics. And so, I would say for us, we are, developing, even though we're kind of a mutual aid organization, and not necessarily people think about mutual aid or our organization as a, political in the streets, type of movement. But for us, we're just trying to develop that arm so that we're actually planning on having like a houseless kind of membership type of situation where they can actually start to organize and go to meetings or do whatever campaigns that they, want to do. So for us, we're, mutual aid, and I forgot to say this, is like inherently political. And so for us, that's where we fall in line and follow. So all of our entire, organization is really built from just the pathway that our ancestors laid for us. So that's what we wish to continue.
For myself, I'd say a lot of it is also some of the principles of Luis Valdez, who was an artist along with the farm worker movement with Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. So he talked about making art directly with the farm workers, and in his Theater of the Sphere, talking about like how that also was a big part of like listening to the community and how do you tell the story, and just like taking those practices of art that we have, which is like collaborative, community focused, and bringing that with us. So that's a big part of like why we center. Again, I keep bringing up creative joy, but like we center that because it's also like if we're gonna be joyful, we're gonna have fun, like we're gonna keep going, and it's gonna give us el ánimo, like the spirit to keep going. And so that's a big part of like I would say is some of our philosophies around that is just like how did those past leaders as well use art in those conversations as well.
Our
Thank you all. Those are
situation
delicious responses. Yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say our situation is a little different because we're pretty loosey goosey. In terms of sort of like we do have a vetting process, but it is a lot more basic of just kind of real basic like cops, yay or nay. You answer yay, sorry. You know, Palestinian liberation, just as an example, yay or nay. You say nay, sorry. Like, and we really try to just be like, hey, thanks for the interest or whatever. I'm sure there's something else you can do, but like you're in the wrong spot. Um, and I think because of that too, what's really interesting is people bring a lot of their own influences for how they want to organize. Um, which again is why it's helpful that we have it's a somewhat vague but also like at least defined sort of broadly. We're doing things anti-capitalist, we're doing things non-hierarchical, we're doing things within these parameters, but like you know is there a specific school of thought that we are all like need to get involved with? Not necessarily. But that being said, like being in the Bay Area, obviously the legacy of the Black Panther Party, I wouldn't say looms because that sounds negative, but like is big, and like it's not it's you can just talk to people who were involved with it. You can just talk to people who were beneficiaries of it. You can, it's all right there. And also just like there's such a rich kind of ad hoc organizing spirit in the Bay Area that oftentimes, especially early on, the people we were talking to for guidance were just people who were like involved in those movements who are just like, I'm kind of tired and I'm not so active anymore, but like I'm here to answer your questions. And there used to be a larger political education component to Common Humanity Collective. I think it kind of went a little more dormant because at its height it was like 2021, like full kind of like everyone's at home. So it's a lot easier to get people to like, hey, read this thing this week and come together and we can all discuss it. So we're kind of looking at bringing it back. But one of the things we'll do periodically is we'll have I think like twice a year we'll have a kind of gathering and get together, and part of that will be like reading a couple pieces so that we all can be on the same page of like what are the things we need to think about, and usually especially in relation to like a specific aspect of how we're organizing that we're trying to investigate and be better about or something, or decision making or consensus building or things like that. But yeah, I think hopefully that answered that question.
I also want to add like not just historical like influences, I would also say contemporary, like specifically for us in Washington. Familias Unidas por la Justicia is an independent indigenous run farm workers union, and it's really doing a lot not just to like fight for like the dignity and equity of farm workers in Washington, but like for farm workers literally worldwide. And like they're building coalitions with other indigenous communities literally on a worldwide level. Also community to community, which is a grassroots organization up in Bellingham, and they do a lot of this conversation. They also have a podcast or they did, and there's great episodes in there around political education that I would encourage folks to listen to. One of the things that Familias Unidas is doing is also just like It is, there are federal laws that make it incredibly difficult for farm workers to organize that have been there since the 1930s. And so like just the education around like, how do we challenge that? How are we going to get rid of that? Like all that is a lot of the conversations that Familias Unidas is having like on a public space. And that is like, it educates all of us. And so like also checking in with them of like, hey, we hear that this is happening. This is coming up to LNI. Like, where's your stance? How can we support you? Like, you know, like we had, they have Marcha Campesina every year. So like, what are your demands? What are the demands that we can help make public that you're doing? And then like, or can we host like one thing we did last year, we hosted a Seattle poster making party. And so not every, you maybe can't go to the march, but come, let us like tell you what we're sharing. We're going to amplify the demands that they have shared with us, and whatever posters you make, we're going to bring them and we'll distribute them there the day of, so your signs can be used. So that way, you know, that's one thing less on their list as well. And so just as well as like acknowledging that we have contemporary Black and Brown leaders right now that are doing this work and that are also leading those conversations that we can continue to learn from.
Beautiful responses. Thank you all. Yeah, I mean, does anybody have any final thoughts to add, I guess, before we close out? Cool. Well, I really appreciate this so much. So much. Sounds like our audience did as well. And yeah, thank you all.
And just a reminder, join us next Monday. Clarence has really put together a terrific, messy conversation on Black music as activism. Going to have some special guests and should be terrific. So bring a friend.
Thank you for having me. That's all I really want to say.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.